My name is Gurpreet Malhotra, and I'm pleased to be here on behalf of the Community Foundation of Mississauga. I'd like to offer you all a warm welcome as we get into today's vital conversation. The topic of the conversation is, why are newcomers leaving Mississauga? And we'd like to explore some solutions to Mississauga's out-migration dilemma. I'd like to confirm, firstly, that today's session is being recorded and will be available as an ongoing resource on the Foundation's website, so you'll be able to refer back to if you'd like to. I should also begin with our land acknowledgement. We begin our session today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather and on which the City of Mississauga operates is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, and the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are truly indebted to all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples with whom we share this land, and we pledge that we seek ways to support and help Indigenous peoples achieve the 94 calls to action that were issued by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and to do so in a timely manner. We call on the various levels of government to not just pay lip service with land acknowledgements, but to continue to address the inequities that Indigenous peoples face on a daily basis and allow them to take their rightful place on these lands. We also acknowledge the systemic discrimination that many groups face who call this land their home. They came here to seek a better life or to broaden their horizons, but because of the color of their skin, their religion, or some other characteristic, they're subjected to discrimination. We particularly recognize people of African ancestry who were stolen from their homes and brought here as slaves, and more recent immigrants such as the Syrians, Afghani, and Ukrainians, who are seeking refuge here due to wars and revolts in their birth countries. While slavery has ended, the legacy lingers. The dreadful tentacles of this dark period in our history still wrap themselves around our bodies and our minds. As we deliberate and discuss matters today, let us commit to respect and uplift each other, to tear down the barriers of prejudice, discrimination, and hatred that seem to be getting stronger. Let us resolve to love ourselves and each other, and to build a just society for all. Today, we have a structured discussion on newcomers and out-migration, with predetermined key questions that we hope to cover with our speakers today, and I'll introduce them shortly. If you have questions related to the discussion, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try our best, depending on time, to accommodate them at the end of our discussion. The Community Foundation of Mississauga staff will be monitoring the chat for any technical issues that are brought up to audience members, and I believe we already caught one and sorted that out. We'd like to acknowledge and wholeheartedly thank our sponsor for today, Novo Nordisk, who is supporting the entire Vital Conversation series. Today's session is the first of 3 Vital Conversations and events. More information will be provided on the next 2 events later in today's presentation. Vital Conversation events are designed to address some of the pressing needs impacting the City of Mississauga by gathering thought leaders and community activators and providing a forum to exchange ideas, opinions, and solutions. All this is made possible through, again, the support of our sponsor. So a big thank you again to Novo Nordisk for their gracious help. Today, we welcome guests from all walks of life in the City of Mississauga and Peel region, including residents, community organizations, and individuals from various charitable organization sectors. I'm not going to introduce myself, but there you go. I'm the CEO of Indus Community Services, and I'm very pleased to introduce our first expert. And our first speaker for today is Effat Ghassemi. She is the Executive Director at the Newcomer Center of Peel. Effat has dedicated her professional career to supporting newcomers to Canada in their settlement and integration journey. She has demonstrated determination and passion towards building a welcoming community for all newcomers in Mississauga and the rest of the Greater Toronto Area. Her community work has touched thousands of newcomer families upon their arrival by providing guidance and support in terms of employment, business startup, continuing education, and other settlement issues. Her team at the NCP have been welcoming and supporting recent cohorts from Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. Welcome, Effat, and thank you for joining us today. Also joining us today is our second speaker, Raif Haddad. He is a fourth-year student at McGill University, specializing in anatomy and cell biology, currently pursuing his dream of becoming a family physician. Wonderful. Raif is of Syrian background. He moved to Canada with his family in 2015, and he has been a past participant of Newcomer Center of Peel programs. Raif will educate us today on his lived experience as a newcomer, and we are very excited to learn from him in today's discussion. So welcome, Raif. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. Our third speaker for today is Jessica Kwik. Jessica is the director of the Peel Newcomer Strategy Group, a local immigration partnership project in the Peel region. As a community collaborative, PNSG engages stakeholders to facilitate better integration of services for newcomers based on local data and planning. Jessica brings an educational and work background in applied health sciences, environmental studies, mental health promotion, and settlement supports. Welcome, Jessica, and thank you for joining us today. Today, the focus of our discussion, as already mentioned, will be newcomers and outmigration. And we hope to understand the obstacles newcomers face in their settlement journey in Mississauga and explore solutions to prevent outmigration from our fair city. As a starting point for the discussion, we'd like to define what we mean by newcomers and outmigration, because sometimes there's some debate around this. So for our purposes today, a newcomer can be best expressed as any permanent foreign-born resident who arrived in Canada at any time over the past 5 years. And when we talk about outmigration, we refer to it to, quote, leaving one geographic region to settle in another. The term typically refers to movement within a country's borders, whereas emigration refers to movement from one country to another. Now that we've established how we define newcomers and outmigration, here's a concerning fact about outmigration. Findings from the 2020-2021 Collective Impact Report by the PNSG reveal that 45% fewer, that's almost 12,000 newcomers, indicated at the port of entry as they arrived in 2020 that they intended to settle in Peel than the year before. So 12,000 less people said they'd like to settle here. This would indicate an unfortunate trend building in recent years, that less newcomers have planned to stay in Mississauga and Peel region, and it is vital to explore the underlying factors that might be drawing newcomers away from our city. And here's an infographic that speaks to the core of the newcomer outmigration issue. This graphic from the 2021 Peel-Halton Local Labour Market Action Plan report reveals that the annual net population growth of Peel has been on a downward trajectory since 2015. So that's well before COVID, with a higher proportion of residents moving away from Peel region to other parts of Ontario as compared to the rest of Canada. So more people are moving out, including a sizable number of newcomer residents. With that said, let's dive into the key questions for today's discussion. Question number one, and I think I'll bug Effat first if I could with this. What is the newcomer experience here in Mississauga, and what aspects of that experience were made worse or more difficult during COVID? And Effat, you're mute.
Thank you for telling me. Thank you, Gurpreet, for your question. I wanted to tell you that, you know, after listening to the minister today with the immigration minister, Honorable Sean Fraser, and then talking to some of our colleagues in Mississauga, like Achieve, which is the testing center, because all the immigrants needs anyway to go to the testing center for the level of language. I've heard different story. They said we are overwhelmingly back to the number of 2019, 2018, and they have a wait list of 2 months. I was really shocked. I said, really? Are you kidding me? So where are they? So there is one little thing that I want to mention. After 2019, after COVID, people who came to Canada, they choose to, I call it immigrants branching to other cities, but they wanted to get services from Mississauga. They're connected with us, but branch to Caledon or a smaller city. Maybe they live there because of a census of, Stats Canada, but really services are provided in Mississauga. And because we are focusing on Mississauga, but I can just mention Brampton also, because Brampton are brothers and sisters of, we are brother and sisters. Anyway, so this is one thing that I learned today, honestly, that it's a higher number of people who are asking for services in Mississauga, higher than 2019. Is that good enough?
It is, but it does speak to what you indicated, that a lot of people might not choose Mississauga as their first choice, or if they do, when they then get further in their settlement journey, move out, move to something more affordable. So let me pop over to Jessica. What do you see as a newcomer experience, and perhaps during COVID, what was an added challenge that people may have experienced?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm glad Effat touched on the increase in service demands, because I think the blip we saw may have been partly due to COVID, where there were fewer people coming in, as can be expected, but the admission levels have been very ambitious, and we're starting to see them. Last year, we received 39,000 in Peel region of permanent residents, and that's not counting temporary residents who are international students and other arrivals. And so I think what we're seeing is actually a greater number of immigration than we ever have in the history of Canada. And the services are not just in person now, they're also digital. So people are accessing services online. So the newcomer experience is really navigating and trying to access different supports in different ways now. And so we see this evolution of how services are delivered, and also how people are settling, where there are obviously increased demands on limited resources such as housing.
No, that makes sense. Raif, you're the most recent of our panel to have arrived in the country. So your experience is more firsthand. What would you have to add to the idea of the newcomer experience and what might have happened during COVID?
Well, I totally agree about the service aspect that Effat has mentioned. I experienced it firsthand when I moved to Mississauga back in 2016. It's very pleasurable to have such a support from the city and the system for someone who came from far away and want to integrate in the system. What I strongly believe that COVID has a major effect on why things were declining. I believe a lot of people put their plans to learn languages or go to work or do anything like this or use the services during the 2 years of COVID. And I would assume that this plunge or this increase of numbers is mainly due to people realizing that, hey, I need to come back to the system, I need to come back to being integrated. And I feel Mississauga has been doing a great job in doing this, having a lot of testing centers and teaching centers. As an immigrant, I feel learning the language will be the first most important thing, and it's the only way you could actually get in the workforce and then eventually get in the education system as well, which as the same way I followed. I went to education instead of like the workforce. So I think what has been done so far is a great way, and maybe the decline in numbers, again, probably it's due to financial needs in terms of housing and accessibility and availability, majority in my opinion.
Let me tease that out a little bit. So what else do you think are drawing newcomers away from the cities, and what would be the impact of this out-migration? Raif, if you could continue your thought there.
Yes, I strongly believe why is this happening. I don't want to say it's all due to housing and finances. It's also due to the fact that even Ontario is expanding. So job opportunities that were only present in Mississauga back in 2016, now available in Hamilton, in Caledon, even in Windsor. So me as a person who could do the same job in Mississauga or somewhere else and still get the same amount of financial allocation with higher availability. So you could say that Mississauga is becoming more like a Toronto in a sense. We're being more bigger, and some people don't like bigger communities, and they just prefer to be, smaller neighborhood where they could do the same job and same routine. So I think that's a big aspect, in my opinion.
No, that's valuable. Effat, what would you add to that? What's drawing newcomers away from the city, and what is the impact of that out-migration?
I really enjoyed listening to Raif and Jessica. I just want to add a little bit and then make sure that our audience are satisfied with what we say around this. Yesterday, actually, Stats Canada sent a report. I hope some of you read it. I was so amazed that almost 1 in 4 people in Canada counted as an immigrant. This is never happened in the history of immigration. 23% of population of Canada is somebody that not born in Canada. So this is even higher than 1921, which was something really drastically happened to the world, and then immigration started from Europe and all those things. So 1 in 4 is an immigrant. So I just want to add to what Raif said, and also Jessica. Digitalization is another factor that people can choose where to go for services, where to sit in the language classes or employment classes. I can sit at, let's see, Sudbury or North Bay or Norfolk or another rural area, but I still attend Indus Community Center or Newcomer Center up here, get the employment information, get the language information, settlement information. There is no, so digitalization really helped people to just branching and going somewhere for the sake of. One thing that you didn't mention is a community. Immigrants love to cluster together as the group. Let's see, Ukrainian wants to be with the Ukrainian. Afghan people wants to cluster with Afghan people, or Syrian. They wanted to be together because they share the culture, the food, the business, everything they shared. At the beginning, when you come to Canada, that's a safety net. You wanted somebody like you, think like you, speak like you. So that's the clustering of family and community added to this conversation, that people branching out of Mississauga, if there is a case, but I'm sure Mississauga is always a hub for immigrants, because it's been a long time that I came to Canada 34 years ago. I moved to Mississauga. I'm not going to go anywhere. This is my city. I call Mississauga my home. That's my 2 cents.
Effat, we don't want you to go anywhere. We want you to stay here and keep building the city. Thanks to Pauline for putting into the chat for everyone that report you'd mentioned, Effat. I pulled it off in my email that was sent last night by StatsCan, that detailed ethnicity and religion and the evolution of the country. Jessica, what are your thoughts about newcomers being drawn away from the city and the impact of that potential out-migration?
For sure. I think something about COVID that I want to mention as well is that it really forced a lot of mobility in general. And so thinking about the recent census data, I have a few slides actually, if you don't mind, I'll share. And that will give us a bit of a sense of where we're at. So hopefully this displays well. Great. So what we're seeing in Mississauga, we did see a dip in immigrants, number of immigrants due to the restriction, but there was still some immigration. And then there's like a big jump back in 2021 of 16,475. So that was last year. And if we spread that out evenly over the year, that's 45 people coming per day. Compared to 30 people coming per day in 2019. So we are seeing an increase. I'm just going to move to the next slide to show an example. And this is a sample year of 2017 that we still have a pretty good retention rate. We have an in-migration that year of 17,000 into Peel region as a whole, and an outmigration of 5,000 approximately. So we have
Sorry, I think your slide flipped.
oh, sorry. Okay. Is that, anyway, I think what I'll do is maybe I'll stop sharing because I don't want to distract. But just to say that in general, we have a good retention rate in Peel region. And so we are retaining more immigrants and newcomers than are going out. And we do need to think about the overall picture where Ontario is seeing a general outmigration. But the net effect of the immigration that we get from international countries means that there's only a 0.25 difference in that there's a net loss of really just 0.25% of the population. So there's just a lot of movement in general, and we'd have to explore more deeply what the factors are around that movement. Could it be seniors retiring and moving out to Atlantic provinces, and what percentage of that is actually newcomers moving to different cities?
Yeah, and Effat mentioned the digitization and the fact that you can do many jobs electronically or access many services electronically, provided, of course, that where you're going to is well served by effective internet, and because that is a limitation the more rural you go in whichever province. So Raif, I'm going to ask you this: what do you think could be done to attract and retain more newcomers to the city? So it's not as bad a picture as it may have looked before, but we'd like to have more or keep more and continue with the vibrancy that we've begun to see here in Mississauga. Raif, what do you think?
I just want to, before I answer, I just want to comment on one thing. I'm super glad that actually digitalization, giving access to rural communities, it's amazing that's happening. At the same time, it's great that the system in Mississauga, how it integrates everyone together. What Effat commented, that actually we have so many communities at the same place and we're all living with harmony, and it's just a lovable environment. To answer your question,
I'm going to pick up on that because I know that was a good aside. Effat did say that the groups cluster, and she's absolutely right, they do. But they, as you point out, though, they also get along with each other, and that's almost like the best of both worlds. But I just wanted to highlight that's one of the nicest things I felt about living here too.
Yeah, that's why I came back to it. But to answer the question, I would think the most important, honestly, what could be done right now is the city contracting with companies and, for example, employers that would hire and train people. So, for example, running programs that offer training. So the first 4 weeks or 12 weeks, training new people who are newcomers, who doesn't have the enough language skills, but because of the city implementation, subsidization, we could put them back in work, because I feel the main drive that is pushing people away is the financial aspect of being in the city. And if we could solve that, which is, I'm pretty sure there's many like job fairs, subsidization, training programs, which has already been happening, but maybe implementing more of them or make them more public so people could know more about them, could actually boost the people confidence of, I think there's a future here. I just gotta give myself some time.
Oh, that's good. Effat, what do you have any thoughts on what could be done to attract and retain?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Raif. You mentioned so many good and important things, but I just want to say Mississauga still is very attractive city. I think because of environment, being around the lake, we have so much greenery. The only things, I think we should really sell this beautiful city to our immigrants and newcomers by exposing. That's the word that Raif mentioned it before. I'm just borrowing exposure. Raif, thank you for that word. So exposure to the beauty of the city, to calmness, to safeness. Mississauga is a safe city, honestly. It's a safe because it's family oriented, because it's a cluster of immigrants. If everywhere you go, to the south, to the east, to the west, to the north, you will see the cluster of immigrants that's living together with a harmony and nice. And then you go to the plaza, you see the culture is there, the smell of food is there. So you see it, you feel it, that this city is a city for all. We should make it Mississauga for all. And I think one of the best player should be employers that can walk into and then open the door and their hearts and their pockets and then say, we need immigrants to work with us because we have a shortage, and then we do this kind of intensives. So that's something that I can see that employers can play a vital role to just make welcoming and retaining our immigrants into this beautiful city. Good.
That's really nicely said. Jessica, what would you add, building on that, supports and programs, what could be put into place that would resolve out-migration or reduce that need to move away?
For sure. I think Effat and Raif touched on, some of the wonderful qualities of Mississauga and some of the informal supports that communities provide, different families coming together to support each other, for example. And I think if those are linked up with formal services, settlement services, employment services, employers, I think we'd have a little bit better cohesion of where, some families who are coming in may not feel like they have supports outside of their, circle of contacts. And so I know, for example, in settlement services, maybe only 40% of newcomers access services, and maybe they aren't aware of services. So that might be a point. And so how could, knowing that there's a large faith group network, how could there be more connections between faith groups and settlement services, for example? Or thinking about the role of the municipalities around zoning of housing. How could the zoning be more inclusionary so there's different levels of income that can be accommodated, or different sizes and types of housing, so that we can ensure that diversity continues and is really well supported. And I think, just knowing that a large proportion of our community is aging, there's a lot of needs around youth as well. Newcomers come with very unique aspects to their family dynamics. And so what could help is also thinking from a gender-based lens. For example, through COVID, female immigrants have been the most impacted around employment in terms of career interruptions and just, regression even. And recent immigrants have earned less and were more worried about their employment. So there's that longer term impact moving ahead. So thinking about how can the informal and formal supports for newcomers kind of knit together so that even within a family, they can feel supported, and that those dynamics are really positive as well.
Oh, terrific. Jessica, just drawing on the question that was in the Q&A, there's how does Mississauga compare to the GTA as far as the challenges, the in-migration, out-migration? Are we about the same? Are we further behind? Are we further ahead?
Yeah, sure. We compared Peel regions in that 27 sample year, and we actually have a better retention rate than Toronto. And Toronto, through COVID, actually saw a net loss. I'm sure they're building up now since then, but just to show that we're not unique. Peel has seen people move out, but also with these increased immigration levels, we're seeing many more people coming in. So really thinking about how can we ensure we accommodate and support those who are coming in.
Oh, that's good. Thanks to Cam for that question. And Sean added a piece. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Effat. Unmute though.
Yeah. I don't want to forget what came to my mind when Jessica was talking about. There's another aspect that we have to learn right now after COVID, that there is a shortage of labor. You know that. So, every day on CBC News, they said, we cannot hire. Human resources is a difficult. We cannot. Our sector also facing. So why this is happening? Now, smaller communities, rural area are waking up to the shortage of employees, sorry. And then they are giving intensive. We work with the rural area. So that's the real example I'm saying. It's not a story that I'm making it. For example, employers in Thunder Bay recently, Thunder Bay region, Sault Ste. Marie and Norfolk County approached us and said, we give incentive, send newcomers to us for the employment, and these are the positions. We give them housing or subsidized housing, with the children go to a school, with the community this, with that. So they are opening the haven and showing the nice face of the smaller city that they were. All white people never ever had immigrants in their own cities. Now they're opening and welcoming that we give them subsidized housing or housing to just come, and then we're sending them. So that's why we see that there is a movement. It's a nice movement, actually. It's a nice movement to just send from the very metropolitan populated cities to the other smaller city, which is a nice thing, actually.
Effat, I love how you said it, but also Sean in the Q&A, he added that places like Kitchener, Windsor, Ottawa, and Kingston have learned to become more welcoming. So that they become a viable option for a culturally appropriate place to settle. So that's part of the change. In some cases, some people have seen well-functioning cities such as Mississauga and others and decide, you know what, we should do that too. And in doing that, attract people, and then the high school stays open and the tax base grows, and there's more interesting things in the grocery store. So there's all sorts of stuff that comes from this. But it's not all just this good news. In the chat, Angela had added that as an immigrant, but not a newcomer, lived in Scarborough before amalgamation, Brampton, Mississauga, and Mississauga is not as friendly as some of the other cities. Mississauga has a beautiful landscape, but there's an aloofness and coolness about it. So unlike Effat, I do not have that warm and familial feeling here, and I think that speaks to connectivity and how you connected and how you settled and when. If it was during COVID, honestly, looking at that chart, Jessica, when you showed about 6,000 people emigrating during COVID, the difficulties that those people must have faced as they all of a sudden find themselves expecting to have a job in 2-3 months or less, and finding that everything's locked down. I mean, that was very difficult. We know that, as we provided emergency COVID supports in the way of food and other supports were needed. So that blip, I'm hoping, as we go back to normal. But Jessica, do you have any thoughts on the fact that some feel Mississauga is aloof, and then other cities are acting more and more friendly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that social piece is so important. I mean, we do planning around infrastructure, and maybe we need some more planning around the social aspect as well, to ensure that we're not just siloed in our individual homes or apartments, and there's vertical isolation as well as horizontal in the way our cities are planned, but really thinking also about socially, how can we really create a fabric that is integrated. And I think we've talked as a small group here about arts and culture, how that can be a real connector, and how can we really leverage what people bring in terms of arts and culture, so that they have a voice and that they're engaged and they really feel that they're contributing and adding to the diversity, and really thinking about where are there points of connection in daily life. Schools are definitely one of those places. We're trying to think about community hubs more and more in different parts of the city. How can we leverage that, and how can we make people more aware in natural ways of their daily life, that they can engage and be more social? And we've been so isolated with COVID. How can we come out of our cocoons a little bit and draw people out as well?
Well, Corinne in the chat adds a really good idea, and that is that stronger promotion of volunteerism. Now, I get it. The newcomer food on the table is always first, but sometimes volunteerism is an opportunity for a member in the family as they begin to get settled. And that is a great connector and a real good way to feel part of the community and move things forward. Raif, I'm going to add something to you that Martha put into the Q&A, and that is rent seems so high in Peel. A newcomer told her last week that someone is asking $850 to share a room. Rent in other cities is not, easy either, but it is somewhat lower. But any thoughts there, Raif?
I personally think the increase in rent comes with the services that is Mississauga offering. I feel if you compare that, let's take a projection around, let's comparison to, for example, New York area in the US. People who are trying to live in New York downtown, their room renting is $2,000 to $3,000 for a single room that is smaller than my room right now. So it's normally just because of the possible services that come with it. I'll give you an example right now. I right now live in Montreal because I study at McGill. I do not pay that much. I don't pay $850 for a single room. I have my own room and I pay less than that. But I'm going to tell you one thing. To get my blood drawn or to get one doctor appointment, it takes me 2 months. In Mississauga, I get it over a phone call. So the thing is, the question is, so you're going to pick your battle. Do you want to live in an expensive city where you can get at least a job that's going to pay you $20 an hour? You don't have to, you can expect easier or higher wages compared to living in areas that is smaller where you get barely the minimum wage and you have less services. So once someone told me that and they're like, you decide when you want to suffer. You want to suffer right now, you want to suffer after. Unfortunately, it's just the way life is. But I feel with having more newcomers, with having more people doing more work or going into the education system more, it's going to definitely bring down the prices, the rent, and it's going to get more services available for people to do, more stuff to do. So I feel that's mainly the reason why and it's unfortunate, as someone mentioned, Kingston, Ottawa, it's definitely cheaper. I know that, but unfortunately, it's... like Mississauga is 1 million people population. Like we have to keep mentioning that it's like double the population of Kingston, for example. So, yeah, it's just unfortunate, but you pick what you want to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Mississauga and Brampton and Caledon together are about 1.4, 1.5 million people. But Hardy had a good point that I want to put in front of Effat, if I can, that he recently met a Ukrainian family who've been here about 3 months. And had no idea that there were any settlement or immigration centers. How can this be improved? What do you think? Please, Effat.
Yeah, I read that question and I wanted to answer. Definitely, that family came in isolation with no connection with the charter of IRCC immigration to the Canadian Red Cross, which is there is a place in the airport, Pearson Airport. There are 2 or 3 stations that when Ukrainian family walk in, they will just get welcome and they get a welcome package and all the information, all the things, and they send them by a taxi to the hotels. And then that we have Gurpreet, we have 2 hotels right now. Now I think it's going to be 3 in Mississauga that host newcomers from Ukraine, Ukrainian nationals. So when they come, they will just direct it. And then next day, we are on the floor, greeting them, talking to them, welcome them. And then it started with opening the banks and OHIBRA and a seat. But these isolated cases, they come by themselves, either by the family member that they didn't know anything or so. This is isolation. But if anybody knows, please send them to, we have amazing settlement sectors, settlement organization in Mississauga only, that every corner has amazing, yours, mine, Dixie Bloor, and others, we can just help them. That's my answer to that question.
And Effat, something else that we've always recognized, because we've been here for 37 years and providing service in one form or another, is that sometimes clients approach and say, I didn't know you were here. And it's what the factor is that there was something else that was their focus. Finding an apartment. This is not an easy, getting the kids registered for school, checking on each other's health, and getting a job. And those could be in any number of orders, and they could be half a dozen other things on top of that. So it's a very, very, very busy time. Our services available is not normally something you think of. Those coming from Ukraine may be used to the concept of services being available, but many coming from other countries don't even know that there is a service system that would be provided for free in order to help teach English or help get a job and so on. So the best thing is if you come across someone to connect them to some of the services that we have. So that's a terrific response, and a brief commercial on behalf of our two organizations. I'm going to go back to you, Jessica, a little bit. At Kathleen's institution, they're hearing from new hires, non-Canadian, that they're facing discrimination in the housing market. They're finding it very difficult to find suitable and affordable housing here. So we risk losing these amazing hires because of structural racism. And what are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a key issue that sometimes doesn't get named. So I'm really glad you brought it up, Kathleen, and thinking about it's almost like something that needs to be done in an ongoing basis. As Mississauga has a diverse population, it's really important that we find ways in all aspects of our society to bring this issue forward and really try to engage people in that conversation and that learning journey, because it's something that obviously we learn as a society, and we need to unlearn things, and to find ways to do that with housing is something that we'll have to really think about. Where are there windows of opportunity to reach landlords and people who are property owners to think about the issues of racism and unpack that and really try to address that in a meaningful way. And it's difficult when there's some set mindsets, and I think it's going to be just really something that will require some deep thought about how to approach that for property owners specifically.
As you know, Indus has been doing a lot of work on international students and the impacts with the 85 plus private colleges in Mississauga, Brampton operating, and more and more public colleges partnering and opening campuses here. We're getting a disproportionate number of international students than the local community would normally have. And when that happens, that soaks up available rental housing. Because if you can have 10 to 15, sometimes even 20 in a typical three-bedroom suburban house, even at $350 to share a room with others, you end up with a situation that some landlords would rather not rent to a newly arrived family or a family looking to get their start in Canada. And so then that causes a significant reduction in what's available, and that's I think it's unfair sometimes to Mississauga and Brampton that so much gets drawn from the housing stock for institutions that decide to come here to open up post-secondary when they should do so in their home, like Sioux College, Mohawk being a pair of examples that I've been critical of. Another piece, a question from an anonymous attendee, and I'll put this to you first, Raif, is, so I grew up in Mississauga, and I say this with both love and understanding of why I left Toronto Centre. Mississauga sometimes feels like a boring place with no vibrancy. I had an African friend come to Mississauga from Rwanda, and she said it felt like the same color houses. You can't tell the difference between anywhere. I think a lot of people feel like Mississauga drowns out the richness of their cultural origins. But I agree, the services of Mississauga are better than a lot of other places for newcomers, but maybe not the cultural and social vibrancy. Raif, when you're not studying to become a doctor at McGill and you're back here with the rest of us, what do you think of nightlife, weekend life here in the city?
So the thing that I did personally was I put myself out there. I engaged myself in different types of job, different types of volunteering activities, including the NCP, which was a great way to meet a lot of people, working in restaurant, working in bars, at the same time working in community service people and volunteering. So that helped me a lot, being an active member of the community, and helped me make more connections. Although I got to point out one thing, that I do feel that accessibility in terms of, as Effat mentioned, exposure, I just feel that I don't see online a lot of things happening. So I would wish if the city of Mississauga would push more advertisements, because I know a lot of things are happening. Like over the summer, the Splashing Square is busy. Every day there is a huge festival. But if you compare it to Montreal, which they do have a lot of festival, but the difference is they publicize it so much that you hear about festivals in Montreal, like the Jazz Festival, and you live in Toronto, like 600-700 kilometers away. And I live 5 kilometers away from Mississauga downtown, and I still don't know when's the Latin or the Indian festivals happen. So just to respond to that, I feel maybe following more pages on Facebook or the internet or Instagram or Twitter would help you see a lot of the things that are happening. And in response from the part of the city and the Newcomer Center, I feel doing more online engagement with people, maybe flyers, posts, advertisements over Facebook or Instagram, that will actually help a lot, because I'm sure someone like the anonymous I'm not sure with their name, I'm sorry, the anonymous commenter had seen that there's certain activities happening over the summer. I'm pretty sure that would have loved to go, and maybe that's something to do with their culture from Rwanda. I'm sure there was something happening in Mississauga that related to their culture, because there's always something happening in Mississauga related to culture. I could definitely guarantee that. But when it's happening, where it's happening, that's Mississauga to be blamed. Like, we need to be more active in that, to let people know that, listen, we have this, come. Yeah.
I think your point's extraordinarily valid. I think a factor of this is that Montreal and other cities, even smaller ones than Mississauga, have their own media center. They have got their own TV station, their own newspapers, and so therefore the local play gets a lot more attention, while in Mississauga and Brampton and other areas around the 905, we have to compete with Toronto to get the attention of the Toronto media, and that makes it harder for everyone to know that, oh, this is what's happening, this is when that parade's happening, that's when this event is happening. It does make it a lot harder for us here. We really did lose something when Cable 10 left, and I hope one day we can at least get something like that back, because I think it would definitely help embolden the city. Effat, what do you think? What about the cultural richness of the city, or versus the potential image that it's boring, it's asleep, it's chugging along quietly in the background? What would you say to that comment? How would you tackle that?
Well, maybe I'll just throw out some statistics. Every 4 years, 4 or 5 years, there are some different cohorts coming to Canada. Right now, we have all Ukrainian, Afghan people, and before Raif came through the cohort of Syrian people, 2015. So every cohort, they have different cultural aspiration, different needs, honestly, they have they're different in all aspects of life. And then we have to be available to change our programs, our services towards their needs. Yesterday, when I was reading the Stats Canada report in 2016, 2021, the 3 top level of immigrants came to Canada. It's changed. Actually, India was always between 1 to 3, but India right now is number 1. Philippines most likely was number 5, 6, 7. Now it's number 2. And the China got into number 3. Number 1 and 2, always whether India or China. So now it's changing. So who are coming to Mississauga in our agency. When we look at the data, we see the cohort are different. Right now we have Ukrainian, Afghan, and then Syrian, and then we had we have people from Africa actually coming from Nigeria. This kind of, the order is changing. That's why every settlement department, settlement agency needs to be on the, really ready on their feet to just change and learn the culture, socioculture of this, and then move on, and then explain. And then as Raif said, we put it flyers, in social media is the best actually right now. People are WhatsApp, social media, Instagram, So these are the good things to attract people. But I think, I read something in the chat. One of our colleagues, I really respect her, said that, Mississauga is not a welcoming city. People are cold. Maybe the weather is cold. No, I'm just kidding. It's not a cold. I think it takes time in order to feel belonging. When you come the first year you're wandering around. You don't know what to do, how to think, how to act, how to learn the culture, how to negotiate with your neighbors. You know what I mean? It happened to me. I'm talking about my experience. It takes at least 1, 2, 3 years in order to melt it and be comfortable talking to others and with your community neighbors and be a little bit warm. I don't know whether I answered your question. I just went on and on about something else, but sorry for that.
No, it's not a quiz. This is a discussion about the issues, and I think you eloquently discussed that. And Angela was raising a point around that one of the first places newcomers look for is faith-based location, church, mosque, temple, etc. Do we provide these places with information or on the social services that are available? And Jessica, is there something on the faith organization basis, what could be done with our existing services to connect better there? What are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have so many faith institutions, which is amazing in Peel. They're not always connected together, so there's not like one button you can press to reach them all. So for example, Peel Newcomer Strategy Group sits on the Interfaith Council of Peel, which has a handful of groups at that table and really tries to promote, some of the newcomer needs, including the different refugee and arrivals, such as the Ukrainians and their different needs, to see where there's connections and where we can sort of build up some collective support. And I think maybe it raises a question about, can we create a collective minimum welcome basket, and think about that together? Like, what would that include, and how could we tailor that for different groups or even different family sizes, or, many come as individuals, some come as couples. So really thinking about, what would that look like, not just materially, but as Angela mentioned, socially, what does that look like? How could we, start matching up people and really involve residents? I think residents are actually, since there's so much support for immigration, residents are actually eager to find opportunities. We hosted a session with Costi, Immigrant Services, around their host program for Ukrainians, as they're trying to match residents who are willing to open up part of their homes or home spaces that they have to Ukrainians for temporary space until they get more permanent residents. So, finding opportunities where we can link with faith groups is definitely on our radar and something we should try to do more of.
No, fantastic. This has been really, really good. Closing thought from Hardy is that we've been relying so much on digital promotion. Sometimes that misses many, many people who don't have access to the internet or the technology. And we've seen that. We saw that throughout COVID, that there is an assumption that everyone has access, but that's not cheap access, and it's not universal. And so a lot of people do get lost if our message is only electronic. We need to find ways to connect with others. But I think that this electronic forum and method of connecting around the issue of newcomers and what we can do to further promote newcomer settlement and residency here in our wonderful city has been terrific. I really appreciate each of you, Effat, Raif, and Jessica, for your ideas, your thoughts, your time, and having this discussion here with us today. I hope it's been promoted ideas and thoughts among others, and hopefully connectivity and an opportunity to make the city an even greater place and space for us and our families. I'd like to, if I could, as we move to a close, introduce Glenn Kolmolka. Glenn is the CEO of the Community Foundation of Mississauga, and he's going to bring closing remarks and an update on our next vital conversations. Glenn, over to you.
Thank you, Gurpreet. I wanted to say thank you to Gurpreet for moderating our session today. As always, you did a fantastic job. This was such an engaging session, and it was wonderful to have so many questions from the chat and from the audience as well. So I thought it was I certainly learned a lot. I hope others on the call did as well. I want to thank each of our wonderful guests, as Gurpreet said, for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us today, for bringing your experience, your passion, and your perspective to today's discussion. From the foundation, I want to recognize our Community Leadership Committee, which is chaired by Helen Seibel, for their support and guidance as we put this series together, and also the amazing staff here at the foundation who put the webinar together today. So Lorraine Crow, Pauline Babesma, and most importantly, Mohsen Kamal, who did most of the heavy lifting to make today's webinar happen. As you can see on the screen right now, the foundation has made a commitment to supporting newcomers in our city. We've launched the Mississauga Fund for Newcomers, which will generate grants specifically to support newcomers and assist them when they arrive in our city. Our board has allocated $50,000 in matching funding, which will be used to match donations to any funds that are created to support newcomers with the foundation. We still do have some funding available, so if there's anybody interested in opening a newcomer fund with the foundation, please visit our website or connect with me directly. We'd love to work with you on that. And finally, I just wanted some reminders. Make sure that these are in your schedule for the next few months. This conversation today was the first in a three-part series around exploring the newcomer experience in Mississauga. So in February, on the 23rd at 10 o'clock, we'll be taking a deeper look at food security issues with respect to newcomers. And on May 28th at 10 o'clock, we'll be exploring housing and employment. So we talked about some of these issues a little bit today, but we're going to go deeper into those specific issues on those days. So please mark those days in your calendar, set them aside. I hope you'll join us for those conversations. And with that, on behalf of the Community Foundation, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for attending today's session, and please enjoy the rest of your day.